Welcome to the first module and first sort of introduction to your book. The reason why I spend a little bit of time on this topic of what is art history is really because we need to understand what it is that we are looking at, what it is that we're talking about, why we are talking about this stuff, really what is the importance of art. And so through here, I'm going to be giving you guys my breakdown of terms, the things that I want you to know, and these terms that I'm going to really emphasize, especially when you do your writing throughout the semester. Now, art history, I'm going to use some notations in the timeline. Instead of BC and AD, we're going to be looking at BCE and CE. They mean the same as far as the year wise, right? And that's just how the textbook's doing it. It's nothing me personally. That's just how it is. So if you're kind of confused why the year is written out BCE, that just means the same as BC. And instead of AD, you'll be seeing CE, which that CE means Common Era. So we have before Common Era and regular Common Era. So just a little bit of understanding there to get on the same page. And really, art history to me is studying the very basics of human creation. And from there, we still do this. We still, as artists today, follow along the same themes. We still engage in the same practices. And really, we find ourselves always kind of reinventing our own wheel. So I'm going to jump into this a little bit and not to get too deep because I just want to cover the terms and get you off of this to the actual artwork here soon. So what is art? Okay. When looking at art, what makes a piece greater than another? Right. This is a huge question. And why has some artwork been chosen to be hung in museums and deemed so valuable or so life-changing, right? We're going to be looking at those. Why do we give so much credit to certain artists over others, right? Now, art history has been going through a lot of revision. So in this course, we are in this revisionist period. And what that means is that kind of gone are the days where we're just sort of looking at the same artists again and again. We are now, as art historians, pulling out new artists and sort of rewriting the art history book to include those who've been excluded over the years. So we're talking about women artists, we're talking about minorities, we're talking about works that may not have been given credence, but over time have still withstood sort of the test of, was this sort of a valid statement of that era? Are these important pieces? And when they go through that and they've been kept and they have some documentation, art historians are able to sort of like refit them into the canon of art history. So we're going to be looking at sort of a new way art history is sort of grouped together. And then, there are many questions, and we're going to try to follow along on the pages and answer these. But right now, just for a starting point, I want to really give you sort of a basis of the semester of why is art really valid in our lives, right? That's something this entire semester I want you to be thinking about. Now, when you look at art, you can say, yeah, I like it. But feel free to also say, no, I don't get it. I don't like that. It doesn't mean anything to me. That's okay, right? None of this has to be, I always think of like the sort of the art snobs in the world where they sometimes will just go along with the work just because. You don't have to do that, right? You have an opinion, and throughout the semester, I want to hear that opinion in your writing assignments and such. So, we're going to go through sort of this next few slides, and we're going to talk about that critiquing process, right? What makes art valid, especially to you, okay? Now, the first thing that we can look at is context, okay? The context is the meaning of the art piece, okay? This word gets used too liberally, where we always say, oh, well, the context of this. No, the context of an art piece is its meaning, all right? This could be economic, philosophical, social, or cultural. The context in which an artwork is created, and the complicity of the artist, that the context is sort of intrinsic in its meaning, okay? The context can change as society changes or interpretation changes over time. And so I give some examples there. A classical biblical scene painted with characters in modern dress provided a boatload of context, right? Context include any number of factors that are around us, and what we really see. So when I threw in this piece here, and this is a newer artist, street artist named Swoon. She uses printmaking as a medium to create these collages, and then she just pastes them on the walls. So there's a temporal factor about it. But but when we look at this and then ask, well, what is the context? Right. Well, let's go back to the top. Is it economic? Is it philosophical, social, cultural? Right. Probably look at it and say, well, it could be more social, but you could put a lens on and say, well, this could be about economy, right? Depending on the person being displayed there, right? But look at where this artwork is done, right? Then we can start to assume this that context is probably more social in nature. But you're taking in everything about the piece in this case, the environment, its medium, its placement, right? The subject matter, all of that. Okay. Now the content, right? And this is where context and content get, sort of messed around with a lot. And this is, content refers to a work's essence, or what is being depicted, right? The subject matter. The content can be tricky because artists, we sometimes put in underlying messages. And so that's why context and content sometimes get mixed. So if we look at what's being depicted here, right, and to know more about this piece, you would have to know that it's during 1935, right? We can look at the date there on the piece and know that this is an artist hired at the time of the Great Depression. And what we're looking at, right, is sort of the entire life of a worker here, right? There's their homes, right, in the middle ground. The background is where they work, but in the foreground, that's where they die. Like everything is right there. And so has that impact and hits you right in the face. Okay, the form. Okay, the form is really everything that should be obvious here, right? Some of it's going to come from the title and the description, but it's going to talk about the medium, right? What do they use to create this? The work style, right? Its technique. Are there any elements designed? So everything put forward. So when you're looking at the form of this, you're going to say, oh, it's enamel. They put it on canvas. It's abstract expressionist. It's it's created with monochromatic colors, right? So you can just go the absolute obvious of what you see. It's got a bunch of splashy lines. It's non-representational, right? It's completely abstract. There's nothing there except a bunch of paint splatters, right? So that's form. So know those because I want you to identify them correctly in your paper when you write, right? I want to hear about the form, the content, and the context of pieces. All right, now when we're looking at it, right, go through these big three, and they will help you really sort of encompass for the viewer what it is that we're looking at, especially when writing about it. But in art history, we have to use these, and the form being how it's made, the content, right, what is the subject matter being depicted, should both line up to give the context, right? There should be an avenue. Now, so even as time changes, right, and I'm going to go back in slides here, so even as we are not 1935 anymore, but because of the form, right, being a photograph, and its content as far as showing everyday life, the context, right, still can stay the same, and it starts to get us back to that meaning. Okay, so here's a really good example, the Mona Lisa through time, right? It's been appropriated so many times, so I loved using this example. And what you're seeing here is it Marcel Duchamp, who's kind of a trickster in art, and he has taken just a regular postcard and just drawn on this mustache and beard and added the LHOOQ on it, Lehoq. And what he did is by appropriating the Mona Lisa and reappropriating, saying, well, is this still valid, right? I'm making this is my Mona Lisa now, right? Is it just as important? Is it just as beautiful, right? And so he's always playing this game of, well, what is art, right? And if you accept this, then I'm going to try another way. Now I'm going to try another way. But here's our context of how he viewed the Mona Lisa, and he's really calling into question, like, why are certain works sort of deemed, as important as they are. And so he adds this, which is interesting because it actually in French means she has hot pants. And he's talking about the ambiguity of the sexuality of this. And if you know anything about the Mona Lisa, you know that there are these questions that maybe it's a self-portrait of Leonardo da Vinci himself, maybe he's dressed in drag, those sort of things. And whether or not, it's very loaded. We don't have time to completely go into it. But this is how we see one artist appropriating and using a new contextual lens to view an artwork. Another thing we need to know, so when I use these terms, you understand, and you probably know them already, but the elements and principles of art. Now, if we're like a construction team, right, the elements are the foundation and all the bones and the structure of this house, right? What goes into making the house. We have to have those elements in place so the principles can then follow. And the principles would be things like, oh, well, a home provides safety, or I get to decorate the home and stuff on the inside. But you can't just do that right off the bat or have that protection or have that comfortable place to live unless you have it built, those being the elements. So the visual elements, right? Line, shape, color, form, texture, color, space. I like to put in time. Time, I believe, is an element of art. But sometimes you see that on lists and sometimes you don't. And the principles, right? So when I combine some lines and shapes, I can begin to get a sense of balance or rhythm or emphasis and proportion and scale and movement, contrast and unity. These I want you to use in your description of the artwork, especially in your final paper. I want to know how you use these. And for more details on them, check out the videos that I've posted. In the Moodle shell, you'll see a video for each of the elements and each of the principles. So if there's any that are confusing, just kind of roll through those at your own leisure. Now, talking about art, right? Now that you've read about the context, the form, elements, and principles of art, and how we interpret it, you may start to get a handle on what terms to use when writing and speaking about art. In this course, you are all art historians with valid minds and opinions on what you see. Using this index of terms, you can justify your claims on why you feel what you do towards a certain piece. We all have different ways of seeing, and I want you to hear about what you see. Art history is the very process of adding to the dialogue of art, and by examining works through several lenses and of the contextual lenses there, and doing this reevaluation over time again and again. Because if an artwork does not stand up to the masses saying, yes, this is valid, or this still speaks to us, then it goes by the wayside, right? Be it storage or trash can or anything, right? Like that's how we have to reevaluate and why it's so important. So through this semester, as we go on, continue to look for and ask yourself these questions of, why did they make this? For what purpose? And what does it mean to us now, right? You have that valid opinion, and I want you to make those statements.